There's an irony in the fact that America is widely heralded as one of the most successful liberal democracies in the world, while those who are its caretakers are generally held in very low esteem. The irony plays out on a daily basis as we witness constant efforts to place even more popular checks on public servants, while simultaneously urging them to conduct themselves more like business. In fact, our affection for democracy seems inversely related to the affection for those who are responsible on a daily basis for making the system work on our behalf. Why is this? In large part, we have a long tradition of distrust of governing power, a sense of distrust so strong that it fueled colonial unrest, a revolution, and a civil war that nearly tore apart the newly formed American nation. Suspicion of power and authority has become high political doctrine among Americans, sown as deeply as our devotion to democracy and individual rights. Our current era displays many of the familiar political conflicts that sustain historic distrust of government. Contentious issues over states' rights versus a powerful national government have re-emerged in the 21st century, as have debates over the role of our government. Administrative challenges are daunting and often confusing to public servants, and while the conflict over specific issues ebbs and flows, there is no cure for the underlying tensions that give rise to them. These tensions are deeply rooted in the American constitutional tradition. Taxpayers have reasserted their disdain for taxes, while taking for granted public goods and services. Some advocate for government spending to stimulate the economy, care for vulnerable citizens, and build infrastructure. Others are increasingly alarmed at the growing government debt, especially unfunded liabilities of state and local governments for pensions and other benefits. Public servants find themselves pitted squarely in the middle of dilemmas like this. Many of them enjoy the challenges, seeing in them opportunities to achieve worthwhile agendas in neighborhoods, communities, states, or the nation. Others enjoy mediating the conflicts, helping people to find livable compromises, and drawing people together around some common good for a sustained action. But some public servants are gradually becoming dispirited and even jaded by the perennial attacks on their roles and their legitimacy. Some burn out and leave public service for more peaceful or prosperous work in other sectors. In their role as democratic stewards, career public servants help maintain the legitimacy of our democratic institutions. Through their constant contact with citizens and the communities tied to the different sectors, career officials give daily witness to what democratic governance means. Each governmental encounter, however small and seemingly insignificant, provides an opportunity to learn more about the problems, prospects, and responsibilities of democratic governance. This ongoing process of justification and legitimation is not simply a matter of finding a rule of law that authorizes a given course of action. Administrators affect the legitimacy of democratic governance in at least three ways. First, the processes administrators use to carry out their work helps to shape citizens' attitudes about basic fairness of governance. Second, the outcomes of administrative work affect citizens' attitudes about whether government is effective. And third, the constant interplay between public officials and citizens from one activity to another over an extended period of time develops strong relationships. Even when citizens do not agree with the outcomes of public decisions, they want to know if everyone has played by the same rules, has had an opportunity to be heard, and has been provided with a fair chance. Like the outcome of elections, citizens can accept the outcome of administrative initiatives more easily if they believe the process has been conducted fairly. Public servants in government have a unique set of process expectations that set them apart from their for-profit and non-profit sector counterparts. Consider for a moment the set of expectations that citizens have for their public servants. Public agencies cannot place a sign above the door that proclaims we have the right to refuse service to anyone. Unlike the private sector, public servants deal with people who may not be able to find an alternative service provider when they are dissatisfied. As a result, citizens interact with government agencies with heightened expectations regarding responsiveness and respect. Public servants must always act in a legally correct fashion, even when doing so does not serve the perceived interests of the citizen. Unlike the private sector, public servants cannot simply give a dissatisfied citizen a replacement item. Public privileges have to be administered as legally prescribed, not simply to please one customer or the other. This helps to avoid favoritism and other undue biases in public decisions. Even when the law does not require equal treatment and procedural fairness, citizens always expect government and its agents to maintain the appearance of fairness. This often results in more elaborate public notice, access, and time taken to make decisions about even seemingly minor affairs. Whatever else the words "we the people" may mean in the U.S. Constitution, it includes being treated with dignity and respect, regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, ethnic background, educational level, economic status, religion, or emotional or physical capability. Public servants are expected to demonstrate equal respect for all, regardless of whom they serve. Public servants are also judged by their ability to deliver results. Citizens, customers, and nonprofit donors want results, especially in matters that affect them directly. It may be about getting their building permit processed as quickly as possible, or obtaining access to municipal utilities without much hassle or interruption, or keeping their neighborhoods safe and quiet, or seeing the results of their charitable gifts in meals and beds for the homeless. Regardless of what the service, most public services are delivered unobtrusively, with hardly any thought on the part of citizens about what's required to make the service work. This quiet and trouble-free delivery is usually taken for granted and thereby indicates a significant degree of legitimacy accompanied by the sense of entitlement. There are also some less obvious ways that public servants foster results-oriented legitimacy through the exercise of their administrative discretion. Many studies of administrative and organizational behavior have revealed a variety of organizational problems that can harm employees, erode public accountability, and compromise effectiveness. These findings have prompted continual efforts to make bureaucracies more humane in the sense of providing a more enriching work environment, less rigid organizational structures, less procedures, and making agencies more representative of the people they serve. When taken seriously, these administrative reforms alter bureaucratic outcomes and thereby affect administrative legitimacy among employees and the citizens who receive services. Since government mostly produces services with nuanced qualities, it ends up having to define what good service means. Good service standards are difficult to measure in the public sector, which has to reconcile competing public values of satisfaction, need, efficiency, effectiveness, equity, and available resources. This places a burden on public servants to negotiate and mediate conflicting views of what counts for good service. Quality of service is often measured by the satisfaction of the target population. Career administrators play an important role in redefining what democratic governance means. They do this in a variety of subtle ways, most often driven by changing public values that alter the relationship between government and society. Through a complicated process of translating guidelines, juggling multiple expectations, and turning organizational constraints into acceptable services, public servants play a critical role in constituting what government itself means in the hearts and minds of the citizens it serves. Public servants affect the validity of their government agencies through processes, results-oriented, and constructive legitimacy. When we discuss knowledge, we're referring to the facts, information, and skills acquired by a public servant through experience or education. It's the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. In the world of administrative practice, forms of tactic knowledge is the basis for making judgments about the what, where, when, and why of public policy decision-making, and especially the implementation. There is first the prudential understanding that is acquired by undertaking an activity over a prolonged period. The subtle nuances and complex interactions among materials, people, and settings acquired by master artisans or crafters through a long period of hands-on experience exemplify this type of tactic knowledge. Police officers, case managers, and city planners rely routinely to make decisions under conditions of limited resources, short time frames, significant uncertainty, and political conflicts that often make systematic analysis impossible. A second kind of tactic knowledge can be described as a feel for the whole and is critically important to successful administrative practice. For public servants, knowledge of the whole tends to accrue through experience in a variety of positions, and by moving to higher-level administrative roles that require an increasingly broad or strategic sense of the institution. As they do so, they become more aware that their work forms part of a larger process of democratic governance. They develop a sense of proportion among priorities and become skilled in balancing competing demands. Third, there's a critical knowledge that gives skilled practitioners a sense of when things are not quite right or when things do not add up. In such situations, their judgments often run against perceived facts or guiding principles. They also tend to run against the tide of opinion among colleagues or in the general public, which then invites conflict. These three types of tactic knowledge contribute to the vital capacity for making judgments where other types of rational or systematic decision-making fail because they lack conditions sufficient for their application. Tactic knowledge is central to successfully managing in public administration. This process of institutionalization establishes cultural identity that makes the whole greater than the sum of an organization's parts. The entity is valued not only for what it can do, but for what it is as an organ of civil society. There are at least three major advantages to taking an institutional approach to the practice of public service. First, it influences our understanding of how change occurs. Second, it improves our understanding of the interface between public and private sector activities. And third and finally, it enriches our understanding of the processes for generating legitimacy. Change in public sector organizations comes about through markedly different processes than those seen in the private sector. Change processes in public institutions are governed by different norms and expectations, cemented by public sentiments that grow out of constitutional traditions. Legislative bodies often give vague or ambiguous policy direction in order to please disparate factions. Constituency groups seldom agree about policy decisions, and some have greater status and influence than others in legislative and agency processes. An institutional approach to public service blurs any bright-line distinction among the public, general government, special district government, and for-profit and not-for-profit sectors. The general government, special district, for-profit, and private nonprofit sectors each are suited to perform distinctive tasks. It's important for public administrators to know what sector can do particularly well and why, as they are occasionally called upon to use their discretionary authority to help restructure the relationship among the four. A final advantage of taking an institutional approach to understanding administrative practice is that it sheds light on an important set of conditions necessary for creating and maintaining the legitimacy of government work. Public organizations have to conduct their functions in a public fishbowl, where all of the decisions they make and almost every document they produce can be scrutinized and second-guessed by any citizen within the jurisdiction. Public organizations must also cope with political pressures. They must adhere to governing board policies, detailed strategic plans, purchasing rules, civil service guidelines, public hearings, and organize citizens groups that may have conflicting or partially informed opinions. But there's an even more fundamental set of considerations that shape the legitimacy of administrative work. An institutional perspective calls public service leaders to consider the fabric of society in which they serve. Political culture, institutions, and regime values are all rooted in the community. So public administrators will increasingly need to tend to the condition of civil society as an outcome for public actions. Different types of institutional forms have essential differences among the sectors based on how they attribute value differences and the breadth of interests they serve. The distinctive characteristics of each sector illustrate that each of the sectors has its own logic and that there's a complex interplay between them. Four institutional forms can be compared based on their interest and values. First, the scope or degree of narrow or common interests. And second, the prioritization of political or market values. Let's take a look. Four types of institutions result from this comparison: special districts, general governments, for-profit organizations, and non-profit organizations. Special districts offer an alternative way of providing public services. Special districts are established to administer one specialized activity. The advantages of special district approach is that it allows citizens to access additional levels of service that government may not be able to provide. The general government sector plays a pivotal role for all sectors. Markets cannot sustain themselves without a stable infrastructure, protections, and regulatory systems. The elaborate legal and procedural environment of many governments helps provide stability to the other sectors. The for-profit, private sector's concern for innovation, creativity, and customer satisfaction is assumed to be the best mechanism for efficiently maximizing the allocation of resources. This may be the case as long as the goals of society are compatible with those of individuals and the demands of customers can be arranged to include a market response. The nonprofit sector provides citizens and corporations with a way to express their personal values and voices through civil society. Nonprofit organizations present an independent alternative to both government sector and private market sectors. Independence from government allows religious organizations and other nonprofits the space to express and live their institutional values. Similarly, independence from for-profit commercial market removes the profit motive for nonprofit decisions and activities to be made. The general government, special district, for-profit, and private nonprofit sectors are each suited to perform distinctive tasks. It's important for public administrators to know what each sector can do particularly well and why, as they are occasionally called upon to use their discretionary authority to help restructure the relationship among the four.